Hi, I'm Nik Carter. I'm an artist for Yamaha saxophones, and I'm here today to attempt to answer the top 10 most Googled questions about the saxophone. So let's have a look. What is the note range on a saxophone? So starting at the bottom, we have a low B flat, going all the way up to, on this saxophone, a high F sharp. I say this saxophone because some saxophones don't have a high F sharp key, so the highest note on those saxophones is a high F. And that's the same for the soprano saxophone, the alto, the tenor and the baritone, which are the four immediate members of the saxophone family. Which saxophone should I start with, alto or tenor? Well, it doesn't really matter. Personally, I started with the alto saxophone when I was 11 years old. The main reason being that the alto suited my size. As I said, I was 11 years old, so I was a child. But I think if you're older, so if you're say 15 up to being an adult, I don't think it really matters. You can start alto or tenor. There's great student instruments, and so it's not necessarily harder to play one or the other. But I think starting on the saxophone, definitely either the alto or the tenor is a great place to start. What are saxophones made of? Basically, they're made of brass, and brass, I believe, has elements of copper in it and elements of zinc in it. But some saxophones are sterling silver, some have sort of nickel sort of keys and things. And also there's different finishes on the saxophones as well, which, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're made of, but they can be plated. So you can have a gold plated finish, you can have a silver finish, but the actual core of the saxophones, and certainly I know Yamaha have their own brand, which they call Yamaha Japanese Brass, which is a various sort of concoction of things, but mainly sort of a brass, but with a high element of copper, I believe. How many types of saxophone are there? As I mentioned before, there are four immediate members of the saxophone family that are more common. This is starting at the highest. So the soprano saxophone down to the alto saxophone, the tenor saxophone and the baritone saxophone. And all these, as I've started, get sort of bigger through the range. So that being four, there are then, let's call them like extended members of the saxophone family. If we go higher than the soprano, we can go up to a sopranino, and the highest saxophone I believe on the market is a soprillo, which is absolutely diddy, about that big or something, really small. And then going the other way, past a baritone, you can have a bass saxophone, a contrabass saxophone, and I believe a sub-contrabass saxophone, which is absolutely ginormous. And again, I think there's still some other auxiliary ones, like you have a C melody, which is a saxophone pitched in C. There's a Swanee sax, which is like got a sliding thing on it. So I would estimate in the entire family anywhere between probably getting up towards 20 in the whole overall, but you're really going down the rabbit hole there of, you know, finding weird and wonderful saxophones. But the main ones I would say are the four that I mentioned, the soprano, the alto, the tenor and the baritone. Will my saxophone need regular maintenance? I'm going to answer that with a massive yes, it will. And I'm just going to mention my saxophone technician, Justina McEwen, who has looked after me for years and still continues to do stuff. I have lots of saxophones and different woodwinds. Yes, having a good technician being able to check your stuff, certainly at a professional level, is, yeah, I'd say it's so important. But if you're learning the saxophone and you've not been playing very long, say that you're at school and playing the saxophone, then really I think you can probably, you know, be starting your school year in the September, and by the time you finish that year, coming around to the summer, I would suggest perhaps taking your saxophone to a local repairer in your music shop or something and getting it checked over. It doesn't mean that it has to be what we call a full overhaul or a full service. There's, as you can see, there's lots of different parts on these instruments, so it could be that there's just a little something that's got out of sync. Yeah, it can be anything for sort of minor tweaks or anything like that. In my opinion, definitely having getting it checked over so that it's all working properly is essential, yeah. How long does it take to learn the saxophone? Well, to make a noise out the saxophone doesn't necessarily take very long at all. You can pop the reed onto the mouthpiece, and before you put the mouthpiece on the saxophone, you can pop the mouthpiece in your mouth and you can blow, put the air through, and you will make a noise. Then the mouthpiece goes onto the saxophone, and then you can basically, without pressing any keys, you make the note, which is a C sharp. So therefore, to actually learn to make a noise on it very quickly, it can be done, I suppose, within a matter of minutes. How far you want to start taking that, and how long does it take to learn the saxophone, in the sense of how long does it take me to start doing grades, or how long does it take me to get to grade 8, or to, you know, to be able to work professionally with it? I would suggest, really, I think when people do grades and things, there's a kind of natural progression. And actually, I think your teacher will tell you that when you get a good teacher, they can sort of assess where you're at, what your you know, how you're picking things up. It's like anything. I think you've got to stick at it. I still learn things today. There's still different articles, different things I'm checking out online. And interestingly, my first ever teacher, a chap called George King, told me that the day I stopped learning was the day that I put the saxophone away, because he was, blessing me, passed away, but he was 92 and he was still calling me every now and again, asking me questions about certain things on the saxophone, or, you know, how do I play this note, or what about this and that, you know. So, you know, it's an instrument for life, and I think you can go down the rabbit hole of lots of fun and learning about it. So yeah, I think there's always something to learn for it. So yeah. How old do I have to be to start learning? Well, as I said, I was 11 when I started. I don't know, perhaps you can be younger, I guess, because at that point it does just depend on your size, I would suggest, because the saxophones are just the size that they are, starting on the alto and things. So it's a physical thing. You've got the weight of the instrument around your neck. I mean, there's different neck straps and harnesses and things available to help compensate that, so it's not too heavy on your back. So really, I'd suggest around about then. I still think would be a good kind of age. Or as I say, if you know, if people can do it younger, then great, you know. And also at the other end of the spectrum, I would say that you're never too old to start learning the saxophone. If you've just retired and you don't want to take up golf and you fancy taking up the saxophone because it's really cool, then yeah, go ahead. Music has no age barriers, and there's probably lots of people that are wanting to learn, that are playing in different bands locally and lots of other fun things like that, your local music centre, things like that. Yeah, so it doesn't hold any age barriers. But as I say, I would reiterate, I think making sure that you're, as a child, that the parents should know this, in the sense that you want to be strong enough to be able to pick the instrument up, because no one wants to sort of hurt themselves or indeed sort of drop the instruments and things. Is it difficult to learn the saxophone? Well, I would say it's not difficult to start with. You can make a noise. I'd say it's probably perhaps one of the easier of the sort of woodwind family to make a noise out of. I think it's probably a lot harder to play a double reed instrument like an oboe or indeed a clarinet. I think they're less forgiving. I think the saxophone is fairly, we call it free blowing, but I think it's, you know, from what I've heard and from other people I've spoken to, other musicians that I know who play these instruments, they're often like, oh, the saxophone feels really easy. And I know when I try and play instruments like the flute, I find that a lot harder than I do the saxophone. So I'd say from that point of view, if you're looking to choose an instrument to start that you think might be perhaps easy to start, then maybe the saxophone. But again, there's the old adage, how long's a piece of string? So I would say it depends on how far you want to go down. Like anything, you know, if you're in sports and you start wanting to do that at a professional level, it's the same within music, and the same as being a saxophonist. There's certain things that to perform, or like what I do, being a session musician, doing lots of different sort of things, from theatre to live, working with artists or studio work, then yeah, there's certain things that you have to work on. Things like intonation, things like, we call it your time, so you know, how you sit, how you play with other musicians and things like that. Yeah, I guess it can be difficult, but I think if you have the love for it and the passion, you don't see it like that. There might be times when you do things that are harder than others, but I think for the most part, it's you know, I wouldn't say it's difficult. I think it's I think the ratio of enjoyment to something being difficult, I'd certainly lean it's a lot more enjoyable than it is difficult. Do I need to read sheet music? Well, it depends. If you want to play in bands like concert bands, big bands, or other things that where other people are reading music, then it's you know, handy if you read music as well, so that you can perform in that setting. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to read music to play the saxophone, which is a different thing. So you'll see a lot of players improvising and playing, you know, their own sort of solos and things. So I think to actually, you know, make a noise at the saxophone, to be able to just learn the fundamentals, then yes, you have, we call it like using your ears, you know, ear training. There's ways of learning. Yeah, I've not actually met any sort of say blind saxophonists or anything like that, but I would gather that you could use, you know, from playing and things, you would still be able to make music the same as, well, Stevie Wonder. I mean, he's not a saxophone player, but he's an amazing musician, composer. He's written incredible hits that we all know. So I would guess on the saxophone, no, the reading part, that doesn't have to happen. But if you're at school and you want to learn like that, it's great. And I think the two go hand in hand. It's nice that, you know, when you're learning the notes on the saxophone or a scale, it's kind of just, you know, you'll play the notes, you go, okay, that's what it looks like. And so you get that kind of recognition, and good teachers and things like to do it. I'd always say it's like being able to speak a different language, really. On a personal note, I've worked with different musicians. So I've done work with like gospel artists and producers, and where the producer didn't want to provide us with sort of sheet music, as it were, because we were in there, and the way that a lot of the music and the horn lines they wanted to do, he would sing the parts to us. So at that point, yes, I can read, but I also needed to be able to listen and just play back what was required of me. So I think they're both good skills to have. I think it's always handy to be able to read music, for sure. What's one of the more famous pieces associated with the sax? So I'm going to give two, because I think it's only fair, because I've got a tenor in my hands, but I'm not forgetting the alto saxophone. And these two would probably be the more common saxophones that you'd want to play. So on the alto, I would suggest Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty. The sax was performed by the late, great Raphael Ravenscroft. I never got to meet Raph once, but he was brilliant. He made an incredible sound and contributed to a lot of great records. But certainly Baker Street is a real legacy. And I think, even though you might think it's a bit dad rock and things, I still think a lot of people associate it with, even today. I think it was maybe 1978, something like that it was written. But yeah, so that's great. And on the tenor, I'm going to put forward George Michael's Careless Whisper. Now the saxophone part on that was played by Steve Gregory. Yeah, again, it's one of these that it kind of has through the power of, I think, of social media, you'll often hear Careless Whisper being used on different things, and sometimes in a comical sense, you know, but at the same time it's a brilliant piece of music. And I think, yeah, those would be the ones I would, if I say to people I play the saxophone, someone will often say, oh, I can play Careless Whisper, can you play Baker Street? It's just what people know. So, but yeah, curious to see, maybe that will change. Perhaps there'll be something else, a bigger solo, who knows. Okay, so that's all 10 questions answered. I hope that's helped. Thank you to Gear for Music for having me in. It's been a lot of fun. And if you want to check out other instruments, I'm here obviously playing the saxophone, but there's loads of instruments on their site. Then yeah, check it out. Thanks a lot.